Hey Thought Roomies, if you're new here, welcome. I'm your host, Hallie Rose, and this week's guest is author, social psychologist, and leading NLP expert, Owen Fitzpatrick. If you're unfamiliar, NLP is short for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Owen is regarded as a leading expert in the field of influence. His Tedx Talk entitled Mind Control, How to Win the War in Your Head, which I'll link in the show notes, has over 1 million views on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, it's great. The video is 10 minutes long and Owen raps every single line. That's right. White Irish dude rapping his entire TED Talk. It is not to be missed. In addition to authoring 8 books, a few of which were actually co-authored with renowned NLP expert Dr. Richard Bandler, who's actually the co-creator of NLP, Owen is also the host of his own podcast called Changing Minds and has traveled to over 100 countries. He's a super engaging storyteller, a natural comedian, and had me laughing almost our entire interview. This episode was so much fun, and it brought me so much joy, and I just cannot wait to share it with you. So without further ado, let's step into the thought room with Owen Fitzpatrick. Owen Fitzpatrick, welcome to the Thought Room.
Thank you very much, Hallie. It's great to be here.
So you and I met through a mutual friend, Pat Divley.
That's like one of the worst Irish accents I've ever heard.
That actually wasn't my Irish accent, but I can't help but not say his name that way. He gets mad.
Oh, because that's understandable. I can understand why he gets mad. I'm just glad you didn't butcher my name the same way as you butchered him, you know? Say it again.
Pat Divley.
Oh, Jesus. It's not even close to Irish. It's like, I don't know, Mozambique maybe.
Well, so we met through Pat because Pat was here in New York. He was actually on this podcast as well. And he was working on his book with you, right?
He is, yeah. We've been working on a book together called Startups and Downs. So it's about the entrepreneurial journey that people have and more to do with the emotional struggles that people have. So, you know, the way you know, loneliness or uncertainty or self-doubt or, you know, all the things that make being an entrepreneur difficult, not just the same old, here's how to market, here's how to social media, that's great, but there's a lot of information there already. What we are doing with this book is like looking at the emotional journey, you know, the feelings.
Completely. Yeah. I can relate to that myself as an entrepreneur.
Of course.
So, and you've actually written 6 books, is that correct? Or
I don't mean to, but 8.
What? Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Who's counting? Well, technically,
I mean, obviously you.
Yeah. So it's 8. I'm glad we clarified that it's 8. No, I mean it's I've done 8 books and a number of them co-written with a guy called Dr. Richard Bandler, who's the co-creator of NLP, and one co-authored with training partner back home, Brian Colbert, and a couple myself as well. So, you know, on different topics, but, you know, like I said, who even remembers this stuff, do you know?
Who knows? Except I know. So one of the books you wrote yourself was called The
Charismatic Edge. Yeah.
Charismatic Edge.
Yeah.
Okay. And just in short, what's that about?
It's basically just about how to help people to become a more engaging version of themselves. So the idea is that we all have charisma naturally. And the problem isn't that we're not born charismatic, because like you'll never see a baby that's boring. You'll never go, oh my God, that 2-year-old, geez, the conversations are so boring with them. You know, all babies are fun to talk to. And it's just as we get older, some people tend to restrict themselves. They don't show the real version of themselves. So they start to, create this different persona, which is like serious and hold themselves back, and they don't express their real personality. And to me, one of the things that I've been working on over the last few years is helping people to be able to let that personality out. Not to the point that they act like 2 or 3-year-olds, obviously, but to the point that they're showing people the real them and they're not hiding it. Because when you hide it, it takes away from how engaging you are. It bores the shit out of people, basically. And you need to allow people see the real you more. And so charisma is really about 2 things: authenticity and expressivity. So the ability to be yourself more by changing the way you think and feel and boosting your self-esteem and all that sort of jazz. And then the second part would be to express that to the world. So to show the world in a more engaging, more interesting way, you know. It's like, hypothetically, if someone was writing beautiful, incredible poetry at an unbelievable level, and they didn't let people read it, even though it was magnificent, wouldn't you want to say to that person, Hallie,
yes,
why are you not sharing this with the world? That's the kind of, it's just an example of what the book is about.
You're being very funny right now because, of course, a few minutes before we started recording this, I was sharing with you some of my poetry that's
incredible poetry,
locked up away. And what you were saying before you even made that little joke about my poetry, I was actually thinking of that conversation we were having about the hidden self, the public self, and is it the private self? Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like your book, in a way, is encouraging people to tap into a little bit more of that hidden self and find the courage to share it with people.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit like what Brené Brown talks about. Brené Brown's some phenomenal work on shame and on vulnerability, and it's about allowing people to see the real you. And so part of that is the hidden sort of self, and I think, I mean, you don't have to disclose everything. I mean, there's a level to it. Like if you're there and you're on a date with someone and you're like going, let me just first of all say, when I was 6 years old, someone saw me. Like, you don't want to go in and be one of these people that expresses to everyone everything and every problem or every mistake you've ever made, of course. But at the same time, people always like, whenever you give a suggestion to people, a lot of times people go back with extremes. So they'll go, oh, well, I can't do that. And then they go to the extreme, like you're disclosing everything. It's not about that. It's just about allowing people to see the fact that you're not perfect. And in this world, sometimes we're trained into, because everyone else seems to be so perfect, then we should be too. And we compare ourselves to them and we go, oh, well, this is what I'm supposed to say, so I'm going to say this about myself. And, oh, look how great I am. And there's all this contest. And that's fine as long as you know it's all a game. But still, to me, letting people see the real you, letting people see your personality, your quirks, your weirdness, it's one of the greatest gifts you can give to another person, because it is something that connects with them at a very real level, at a human to human level, at a soul to soul level. They feel that they can recognize that, like we talked about, like I can recognize from your poetry so many real human experiences that were beautifully articulated, but that I haven't seen, other people disclosing in that way. And sometimes you can get it from movies or films, sometimes from a song. But when you have that, when you have someone that's pinpointing human experiences that are so powerful and so true, but you would never let someone know that, it's not just refreshing. It's huge. It is such a huge part. So with charisma, for me, it's like about allowing people not necessarily to see everything about you, but just so that they know why you're different. And we talk about branding, making, one company be more different to another. But as an individual, you also need to express what makes you different. And what makes you different doesn't have to make you better. It just has to make you different. But when it's different, people remember that more easily. And that's, sorry, I just went off there.
It was terribly boring. I was falling asleep.
Sorry to everyone out there. Don't listen to this while you're driving or operating machinery. It's probably not good.
No, but what you were just saying really reminded me of that famous Marianne Williamson speech, which then was in Coach Carter. And she talks about when we liberate ourselves, from our own fear. And we, of course, I'm paraphrasing here, but when we step into our light, essentially, we liberate others. We allow and invite others to be who they truly are. So if I step into my weird and just let people see it, I think that's a beautiful invitation for others to go, oh, okay, she's doing that. And she's making that weird cool. And I can do that too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I think it's very true. And that's what we do. We tend to lead by example in many ways. But I think it's not just about leading by example. It's also like, it's allowing ourselves to, like, there's a deep satisfaction that comes with that, like when you express, like I was saying to you earlier, like when you express yourself creatively or artistically and you let other people see it, as long as you can get out of the way of the whole fucking what will they think and the whole judgment shit and the whole, oh my God, blah, 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 blah. As long as you can move that aside and handle that, okay, there's a beauty that comes with other people admiring your work and connecting with your work, whether it's a short film or it's a talk or a poem or whatever. It's like when you get that moment that when you let's say you're being funny, when you see that, when you hear that laughter, or when you look at a person's face and you can see them react to something, it's that moment which is just like, because they connect with you at that level, and any of the other bullshit that you might have said, it doesn't have that. It doesn't have that fire that creation has,
You just said something that reminded me of your TED Talk, because you just said whether it's a talk. And so I watched your TED Talk on YouTube.
Oh, no.
And I was impressed. Pat told me about it. He's like, you got to watch Owen. And this is his voice. No, I'm just kidding. He's like, you got to watch Owen's TED Talk. He's got over 1 million views on this. And this dude raps his TED Talk.
Yeah,
that's such an OG move.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a middle-aged white guy.
Well, I don't know about middle-aged, Hallie. I think maybe you're getting a little bit caught up. I think if anyone sees any of the video promos for this, they'll see that that guy's not middle-aged. Is he in his early 30s? That's probably what
just
people
had
would
puberty,
think.
I think.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know what
just
the
blessed
middle-aged.
with a very deep voice.
That's it. I don't know what all the middle-aged stuff is about, but yeah. It is. I mean, it sounds embarrassing. It probably was, but I tell you, it was the most favorite thing I think I've ever done. I loved it, and I loved it because it was difficult, and because it was like art as opposed to everything else I do. So it was
and the title of that, mind control.
Yeah.
How to win the war in your head.
Yeah.
That's a great title.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it was, I mean, I always was going to write about, I was always going to talk about that. And it didn't start as a poem. So the whole 10 minutes is a poem. It didn't start as that. It started as sort of just normal speech with certain ideas, talking about inner propaganda, the fact that we talk about external propaganda where governments or, companies or organizations convince us of certain things through the way in which they manipulate, information and through persuasive skills. But we also do the same thing ourselves. We, depending on what mood we're in and our emotions, tend to dictate, and our own cognitive biases, all this stuff goes on and dictates how we think about whatever it is we think about. And I struggled with, low self-esteem and depression when I was younger. And, I struggle with things every now and then. And it's always the, let's say, dark side of your persona if we're simplifying it. And it's very effective. I mean, the dark voice that we have, the negative voice, or whatever you want to describe it as, the black dog, the fucking white or black cloud or whatever, the metaphor we have for depression, it's smart. I mean, it's us. So it uses the same mechanisms as us. And so the whole inner propaganda is that it's almost like an inner dictator. And it points our attention to what it wants our attention to be on, which is like anything from fucking hopelessness into the future or the sadness of what has come beforehand. And so the whole point of the talk was trying to get more control over your own mind instead of being controlled and win that war. And not everyone likes the metaphor, because some people are like, oh, look, Owen, you need to fucking be peaceful and just be mindful and just meditate and shut the fuck up with all this like war stuff. You don't have to. And that's fine, because I agree to a great extent with a lot of that. But sometimes the metaphor is useful. For me, it was useful. I know for a lot of people, it's useful. It's this idea that we can battle and we can fight, and we don't have to be the victims of our own story. And so that's where the heading or the title came from. And I try to outline in the poem how this works. So what happens as we go through it, and then inside, as you saw, are the three sort of rap battles between me and me. I win, by the way. That's sorry for the spoiler. Spoiler alert, I win. I win the battle against myself. But it's just, I kind of decided as well to go quite vulnerable as well. Because as you heard in the things, it's like talking about some real insecure issues and horrible shit. And I just figured, go big or go home. If you're going to do this, you don't want to hide. You want to let people see everything. And, being online with 1 million views is great, but with that, you get loads of amazing comments, really beautiful things, and some wonderful, but you also get like some fucking brutal, what do you call them? Trolls.
What's the?
Oh, there's a combination of stuff. They, pointing fingers at this and that and the other. It's like, but now honestly, I read them and I'm just like, it's a little bit of a punch, but then I just laugh. And I kind of agree with some of them. Like some of them, it's like some of the greatest insults, they base it on truth, and then they just ramp it up and then, attack you in this way, and you just going.
What's the funniest one?
Well, there's a lot of them that go, oh, it's great. Finally, Van Gogh came back from the dead to give us a fucking, I don't look like Van Gogh, by the way. I don't give a shit what anybody says. So the Van Gogh's great TED Talk. It's really great. And I'm like, oh, thanks very much, guys. And then there's like, I don't know, they're just, some of them are fair enough. It's like, oh, I don't remember it because it was a rhyme. And I'm like, yeah, some people won't, some people will better and some people won't. That's normal. But it's just, I think you have to be able to discern the difference between people that are disappointed, angry outside. They're in their mother's basement and they're, writing it with one hand and the other hand somewhere else to a stained keyboard, and they're just trying to attack because they feel so bad themselves.
Right, of course.
And people who are genuinely like just taking the piss out of you and just going, "You're a fucking idiot," like you know. And it is, to be honest, that at least the start of the rhymes, it is a little cringy. So I understand that, and I understand that some people go, "Oh, I can't even watch." But to me, overall, if you look at the 10 minutes. I'm happy with it, like not everything's going to be perfect, but I worked hard on it and it came across well, and I'm proud of it. And so as long as I'm proud of it, it's okay. I think most of the time when we do get more offended and more upset when people say what they say, I think it often comes as a result of our own insecurities because we kind of agree with them. You know what I mean? Whereas with this one, I'm going, I know it's cringy, I know this, but I'm real happy with it because I think it's fucking good. Yeah. Whereas with other stuff I've done, like some of my acting stuff, I'd be much more wary because if someone says it, if I think, Jesus, that was a terrible, like it's not always terrible, but it's like if I say, oh God, that wasn't a good scene. And if someone else goes, that wasn't a good, that would sting a lot more because when they say it, I'm also saying it and I'm going, they're fucking right, it's horrible. So with the Tedx Talk, it was not so bad. So, but you know what? It was a wonderful experience. It was tough. It was challenging to remember, like normally I speak off the cuff all the time, and to memorize 10 minutes in a row of poem where I couldn't get a word wrong because it fucks the rhythm off, that was tough. But I loved every second of it. I loved that kind of challenge. So yeah, that was my TEDx.
Yeah, it was amazing. I really resonated with when you're kind of switching back and forth, being these two characters, these two versions of yourself. And it reminds me of the cartoons where there's like an angel and a devil.
That's it.
On the shoulder. And it was the embodiment of that. And I personally saw it and I was like, oh, yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing I couldn't articulate that's happening inside of me sometimes. So it was, I was on the edge of my seat just kind of watching, and half of the phrases you had said to yourself when you were that negative self were things I've directly experienced myself. And one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast, and I called it The Thought Room, was because there's this idea that, we have something like 68,000 thoughts a day and 98% of them are the same exact thoughts we had the day before. So it's about consciously choosing
Sure.
the programming, essentially, or rewriting it when it's something's not really working for us anymore. So this podcast for me is a personal journey of putting myself out there, essentially trying to heal myself, but doing it in a way that it's out there for others, and hopefully other people can learn from what's going on, because, you know, we talked about depression, and I definitely have suffered from it multiple times. I feel like it comes up on almost every podcast interview because it's just so prevalent. And I think it really starts with, what do you called it? So negative internal dialogue. That stuck with me.
To me, like depression, the thing about it is that we've lots of metaphors to describe it, right? So the one I never liked was the black dog, right? Because I'm like, why are you fucking hurting poor? Like, dogs are great. You know, why are you using a dog as like the fucking depression?
I don't know the black dog.
Oh, metaphor. It's well, I've heard it a lot. Well, then again, I'm like,
you're not middle-aged.
Yeah. Thanks, Hallie. Jesus Christ. Talking about depression, I'm going to be fucking depressed at the end of this fucking podcast. I'm already on my way down now. The decrepit old man that I am. So metaphorically speaking, you know, people use different metaphors, and I like the cloud and stuff like that. And but the way I sort of see it is depression is a liar, and it's a liar in that whenever you feel depressed, your thoughts feel true. I have a line in the poem where I say, when you're depressed, you don't think negatively. When you're depressed, you believe negatively. And to me, that's one of the most important things that I try to get across, is that, you know, let's say your friend is depressed and you sit down to them and you say to them, "Oh, you've nothing to be depressed about. Everything is great." You can't expect them to go, "Really? Everything's great? Oh, brilliant. Sorry, I was thinking negatively there. Glad you reminded me everything's great. Oh, brilliant. Oh, I'm so happy now." That's not the way it works, because it's not that you think that the world is fucked. It's that you're convinced it is. You're convinced they hate you. You're convinced that nothing will work out. You're convinced you'll always be in this fucking rut. You're convinced that you're a shameful creature that doesn't deserve it. You're convinced that you're middle-aged. Whatever the thing is, right? You're convinced of this. And so when you're convinced of it, you can't just hear some positive like contrast to that and go, "Oh, well, actually things are fine." Instead, what has to happen is you have to come to terms with how you're feeling, and you have to come to terms with this particular idea or this conviction, and then you've got to challenge it. And one way to do it, I know, is practicing things like mindfulness. But the reason that works is because, in many cases, is because you're detaching yourself from that thought. So you see that thought as separate from yourself. And the problems Eckhart Tolle talks about is the fact that we identify with our thoughts as if we are them. But that isn't the only way that works, and that isn't for everybody. Another way that works is to be able to challenge the thoughts. So noticing whenever you come up, and whether you use CBT for this, cognitive behavioral therapy, or you use NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, or whatever way you're doing it, or even, you know, the work, Katie, you know, Byron Katie. Any of those ways, you're still doing the same thing. You're challenging people and challenging yourself on those thoughts. So when you're in that state and you're going, "Everybody hates me," you're able to go, "Everybody hates you? How do you know everybody hates you? Who says everybody hates you? Where's your evidence that everyone hates you? What do you mean by hate? In what situations do they hate you? Have you ever thought of a time where one person loved you?" You know, and when you drill yourself with those kind of questions, you can't keep holding that up. When I'm working with, I used to work with, I used to work as a therapist for years, and I worked with hundreds of people with depression. And it was always true questions like that, where you're getting people to be aware of the fact that those beliefs aren't right. And they're finding out for themselves. You're not saying you're wrong. They're learning through you asking the questions from their own point of view that they're wrong. But that's half of it. The other half of it is them building up a more useful way of thinking. So one of the things that I try to do myself when I'm in a bad state, whenever that is for whatever reason, is I accept it's a little bit like if you've ever been drunk, or you've ever been high, or you've ever been on anything. You think this is the way it is, but it's not the way it is. It's even hungover. It's the same thing. You think this is it. If you ever have one of those, like, you know, heebie-jeebies, where, you know, you wake up hungover and you're like this, and then you think about a conversation you had and go, oh, Jesus, what did I say there? And you start to look at your text message and you text somebody and they don't text you back straight away and you're going, oh no, what have I done? Oh my God, my friendship's ended, everything's ended, I'm going to be fired, blah, blah, blah. Whatever you're thinking. And then someone texts you back going, oh yeah, oh, it was good. And you immediately realize, oh shit, well, that was because you were in the wrong state. And in that state, you convince yourself of something. Depression is the same. You're convinced of a certain reality, and it's very difficult for you to see anything else that. And so the way I like to see it, and what helps me at least, is I like to see right now I can't trust myself. It feels true, but I can't trust myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep fucking getting done what I need to get done, look after my body, eat healthy, exercise, do whatever I need to do, get sleep. But when I'm in a position where I can think more clearly, then we're good. But up until that point in time, I'm not going to take anything that I say to myself seriously. And that really helps. And then that combined with challenging the questions and not allowing yourself off the hook with them, to me, they're two of the most powerful things we can do to help us to combat depression, because it's insidious. It's like sneaks into us and it just tries to dominate. And this internal dialogue between our voices, it's not really a dialogue, it's a multilogue. It's like a combination of different types of voices. But it's like an army, and we have to face that with our own army. And that's why I say the war that we try to win in our heads, because it is a war. It's not a battle. This is, you know, once you're over depression, you're not over it. You just got through it, and it'll come, you know, you'll face it time and time again. But you have to be up for it, because it's a fucking fight, you know. And a lot of people don't admit. A lot of people like the idea of like, oh well, I just fucking learned this technique and now I'm happy all the time. And I don't know who you're kidding, you know. Maybe you're right and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe you can just snap your fingers and everything's fine. But I don't buy into it. Not after all the people I've worked with and stuff. It's a slog, but you know, you can get out, you can get through it, and you can come out the other side.
Yeah, I think we're creatures of forgetting, so we tend to just kind of get back into these loops, and we're constantly just trying to keep ourselves on course. At least I feel that way personally. Yeah. And I like what you're talking about with, I can't trust myself right now. I'm definitely learning to become more aware of that. And what I go back to on a foundational level when I'm in those states, one, you have to recognize you're in one of those states. And it takes some time. I mean, this happened to me the other day, and I was really manically trying to get a bunch of stuff done for this and for my company. And I noticed I was literally just pacing around the apartment. And I was also simultaneously feeling hangry and like all these things. And I was just like, whoa, Hal. I just stopped walking. I was like, what do you need right now? And I was like, I need air. And then I was like, I should just go up on the roof and sit on my yoga mat. And then that other voice was like, you can't do that. You have so much work to do. You don't deserve to do that. And this, and that. And then I was like, no, stay here. Wait a sec, though. If you get this under control, if you give this the space that it needs, you will be able to get the work done. But we have to be with what's here first. And this is just where we are right now. You can't push against that. You can't will it away. It's where we are. It's how we're feeling. Let's go up onto the roof. And I did. Right. And finally the energy was able to move, and I just felt, oh my gosh, I can take a deep breath now. I think I was just having a little bit of a panic attack of some sort, and wow, amazing. Good. I feel great. So kind of dropping back into the body has been a great tool for me, and tapping into body wisdom, whether it's, I think I just need to move. You know, I know you run, I do yoga. Sometimes when all else fails, just kind of going to those routines. I mean, tools, having tools.
100%. I mean, there's a lady called Lisa Feldman Barrett who I've been talking about her quite a lot. She wrote a book called How Emotions Are Made, and she's a like neuroscientist and studying the brain and stuff. And she's an interesting theory about how our emotions are created. So she talks about the classical view and then her view, right? And the classical view is the whole triad brain. So we have the triune brain, that we have the, initial sort of brain stem and the kind of the base brain that we all have. Then we have the limbic system with the emotional brain, and then we have the logical side, which is the prefrontal cortex and all that area. And so she talks about the fact that most theoreticians out there, or most people that are discussing the brain and brain science, use that model as a way of thinking, and say that the emotions are created in the limbic system, and the limbic system then affects the brain. So we're almost like emotional hijacking, and therefore that's how it works. Her way of thinking is a little different. She says that we construct each emotion based upon a number of things that go on in our head. A thing called interoception, where we go in and we go inside our head and start to figure out what's happening. So we look to our bodies, we look to the signals we get outside. The way I love the description she has is that our brains are basically are blind. So our brains are in a dark box in our head, and the only information they get is through the senses that bring information to it, and from the body. So we get information to the senses and information in the body. Now we also have memories and associations and lessons and learnings that we have. And our brains are always trying to predict the future. So they want to predict what's going to happen next. And so through that, they create these emotions in order to be able to try to figure out what we're supposed to feel. And we have these emotional concepts of what this is. The reason I bring this up is because a big part of it is body budget. And it's the amount of energy that you need at that moment in time. And so one of the things that she describes is you need to do what you can to look after your body, because your body will have a huge impact on your brain, on how your brain reacts, on emotionally how you feel at that moment. And this body budget, she calls, making sure you've invested enough in making sure that your body is feeling good, plays a huge part in determining how well you're able to think and the kind of emotions you want to create. And so science itself is looking at it. If you look at anything to do with the gut and the brain connection, it's becoming more and more apparent that what we eat has a direct impact upon our brain. I'm a new believer to that. I always believed it, but I wasn't like I didn't think it was that big a deal. But over the last few years, I've experienced it myself that it's huge. And so given all that, it's not so much that we just think our way into a fuddle, because the stereotypical way people think about depression is something bad happens. You say to yourself a bunch of negative shit in your head and you become depressed. And so the way people try to deal with it is they go, no, you're wrong, that it's okay. And they try to change the narrative that you're talking about. The problem is that narrative that you've said to yourself about that event is based on a state that you're in. So the problem is that your feelings are driving your thoughts. And so one of the most interesting things that we know about the brain now is our emotions lead. So we think that our brains, our conscious brains, our rational brains are in control. But really our emotional brains are in control. And most of the time our rational brains are like, I think it was described best, a guy called Jonathan Haidt talks and describes about it like it's like your rationalization, your thinking brain is like the lawyer for your emotional brain. So it justifies what's going on. So you feel, I like this idea. And then your brain explains why it's a good idea. You're depressed, you feel like shit. Your brain starts to explain to you why your life is a piece of shit. And so if someone else tries to argue with that, you're not going to believe it because your feelings are so strong. And so what we need to do is we need to get back to the feelings. That's why, there's a multitude of different ways that we can handle that. Everything from, taking medication to meditation to, like you did, listening to your body, like changing our diet and exercise. And then another way to do it is challenging the beliefs that we have at a core way, so that we know we're full of shit, so we don't continuously bring ourselves down. But a large part of it comes down to changing the emotional states, I think, and exactly what you described there is a phenomenal way to be able to do that, because, we beat ourselves up so much. To give yourself the space to actually go on the roof to do that, sometimes it's all you need. Sometimes you need more, but, you won't know that until you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just thinking, as people are listening to this, some people are likely, meditators, and they're kind of in this practice of being aware of what their thoughts are and what their feelings are and whether they're true or not. But some others maybe are hearing this for the very first time, and they've perhaps never even really considered that they're separate, that their thoughts and feelings are not one and the same, and one could be true and the other could not be true, or vice versa. So to those people who are just starting off on this path, I mean, this kind of seems like a gargantuan task to start becoming aware of our thoughts and feelings, and then to start reprogramming it or choosing, new pathways. How does somebody who's just hearing this for the first time begin to notice? Just notice what they're feeling and start separating it.
Well, I think there's, in terms of noticing what we're feeling, one of the things to be aware of is that we all have the capacity to describe what's happening in us at any moment in time. Like if you're walking, if you're walking for like 3 hours, you're likely to say, I'm tired. If you're in New York City in the summer, you're likely to say, geez, I'm hot. Like, we're able to describe physically what's going on. We can also describe emotionally what's going on. Now, different people have what this lady, Lisa Feldman Barrett, calls emotional granularity. And basically that means that different people have the ability to discern different emotions better than others. So some people, when they feel bad, they go, I feel bad. Other people, I feel depressed. Other people, I feel manically depressed. Like, people will have different ways to describe the emotional things. So one way is to improve your emotional granularity. In other words, try to understand and learn about the different terms, the different emotional words that we use, and try to be able to build up your vocabulary on that. So, start to look into that. Reading often helps, especially reading fiction, because a lot of the descriptions where they're trying to convey what's going on, they'll show you and showcase what they're experiencing emotionally, and there'll be a label there often. So you learn these are the labels for that. So the more labels you have, the more words you have to describe it, the better it is. Because the more you can describe what's happening inside of you, the more distance you have from that emotion, and the more separate you are from that. And so you enrich your vocabulary of that. And then you can take it a step further. You go, what does that feel like physically for me? So when I'm depressed, what am I feeling physically? How is my chest feeling? How's my stomach feeling? How's my throat feeling? How's my nose feeling? How are my eyes feeling? How are my legs feeling? When you start to unpack what the different parts of your body are feeling, then you start to get to the point where now it's a physical sensation, and all physical sensations are transitory, so they're going to go. So when you get yourself to that point, it gives you that freedom, that moment. And so I'd say, first of all, recognize that we already describe ourselves. Second of all, improve the words that you have and the vocabulary that you have around your emotions. And then third of all, when you're describing your emotions, be able to describe what they feel physically. And once you do that, it's easier then to discern the difference between your thoughts and your feelings, because your emotions are really what your feelings are, right? So a feeling could be a sensation, it could be physical, it could be internal. An emotion is the feelings that affect sort of everything in our mind. So it's always connected to our thoughts. A mood is an emotion that we hold for a longer period of time. And then over time, there's a suggestion that a temperament is, the moods that we have that affect what kind of people we are. And then you could even go further to a personality. But basically, being able to discern a thought is just an idea that you have. If you think to yourself, that's a good idea, or you think to yourself, Trump is whatever, then immediately you go into that and you make that thought. If you have a feeling of certainty around that thought, that's a belief. And what gets you into problems or mischief isn't your thoughts, it's your beliefs. So, like, I'll often joke with friends, I go, well, I could get knocked over by a car on the way home, and people go, don't say it. As if like if that's the way the world worked, I just go, me and Jennifer Lawrence are going to marry tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? And then it would just happen the following day. Or, you know what? I'm going to earn $20 million tomorrow. Do you know? But that's not, unfortunately, devastatingly, that's not how life works. So because that's not how life works, we can think crazy thoughts, and that's fine. But the beliefs are what get us into trouble, because when you feel certain about something, your brain filters everything that happens after that. So all of the thoughts you have filters whatever goes on, and then that becomes your sort of mindset, your attitude, your philosophy of life, and it's dominated. And certain feelings like depression can trigger a whole set of beliefs that then filter everything that happens while you're depressed into becoming more evidence that backs up the claims that they make and stuff. Sorry, I went a bit all over the shop there.
No, it's like if you think you can, you can. And if you think you can't, you can't. And we spoke about this on the last episode I recorded with this filmmaker, Cyrus Sutton, and we were talking about the law of attraction, and we were talking about a belief is just a thought that's repeated over and over and over again. So this is kind of an interesting thought, because you said, okay, if I have the thought I'm going to marry Jennifer Lawrence, not going to happen. Or even,
I'm not counting it out.
Well,
apparently
she knows you're middle-aged now.
I was just going to say she goes for middle-aged guys, so I think she's already engaged and married, so it's all good.
But even like, if you think I'm going to be successful, and then it becomes a belief, and you believe now I'm going to get this thing done, or I'm going to make X amount of money, that can tangibly happen now, because this belief also has momentum behind it of all your thoughts charging it. Like you said, it's a lens now through which you're viewing the world. And you start walking around going, see, I just networked with this person. I really am going to be successful. And see, this thing just came through. And so it's interesting. It's like, can that be applied to anything, I wonder? And once something becomes a belief and we link it with the power of emotion and expectation.
Yeah. I think definitely we can make a lot of progress. However, I will put one caveat from my point of view in there, and that the problem with The Secret is, The Secret's legit in terms of, at a very basic level, law of attraction. Whatever you think about, you'll attract into your life, right? So I ain't arguing with that. The problem is people leave it at that. There's fucking people all over the world that read that book and they're fucking delighted because they're lazy. And they go, what? Like, instead of learning all this other stuff, instead of spending ages learning about NLP or learning meditation or learning this or learning that, all I have to do is imagine what I want, create a vision board, and I attract it into my life. Brilliant. And that's not the way it works. You need to actually take action. So I think the missing piece there is, like, for example, if you wanted to be successful at, let's say, poetry, right? I'm sorry for continuously going in. But the reason why you would be, one part is your mindset and attitude, and that's an important piece. But you have to have talent in it. Do you get me? Like, there has to be something else there. And I don't, like, I know all about grit and stuff, but even if you call talent something that you acquire through practice, I'm fine with that definition as well. But it has to be something that you're good at, because if you turn around and you just assume positive thinking is going to take you everywhere, or believing in something is going to take you to where you need to go, it's just an error-prone set of beliefs. Because even you take Conor McGregor, who maybe some of the listeners will know, but he's very well-known UFC fighter. He's not everyone's cup of tea. I think he's great, but he's definition of that belief. But if he wasn't as good as he is, and if he didn't get there by hard work and a mixture of talent, but a lot of hard work and working on it, then he wouldn't have achieved all the things that he said he was going to achieve. So a large part of it isn't just about your belief. A large part of it is, have you the skills, or have you worked hard over time to cultivate the kinds of skills that would allow you to do that? And so if you decide to go in and do poetry, you'll do great because you're remarkably talented at it. But if someone else, goes in and tries to write a book on poetry, all the positive thinking in the world is not going to make a difference. So I think that we have to look at that. And we also have to look at, a lot of times, success is not so much about how good you are, but it's about who you know. And we kind of shy around that because it's not a nice thought that your success is determined by your relationships, but a lot of times it is. And I don't think that's always a bad thing. I think particularly in terms of like performance and art, it definitely, relationships go a long way. But I think it'd be redundant for us just to leave it at, well, it's just positive thinking. And look, I've been in this field since I started learning about this stuff when I was 13 years old, which, as you pointed out, was a long time ago. So
was I even born? No.
Yeah. Well, and I remember, back, I remember talking to Socrates about this. The two of us were sitting in his garden, because I'm about that age, apparently. But it's just this idea of, it's just this idea that we need to get to, where we need to look at the real world as well, and that's why, just because you believe you're going to succeed won't guarantee it. But if you believe you can succeed and you do the hard work and you work really fucking hard and you build and you reach out and you experiment and you do what you can to grow and learn and you set it as your number one target, you're much more likely to succeed. And sometimes you need luck and sometimes not. But I think a big part is the attitude, and many people who are brilliant weren't successful because they had the wrong attitude. But as well as that, just having the attitude isn't enough, I think. So that's the only thing I would add to it, you know.
I agree. And I also think, you know, as a caveat to all that, there's something that happens when you start having a positive mindset, though, that even if, say, you're kind of shitty at writing poetry, but you have this dream of doing it. Mm-hmm. And obviously, if you're telling yourself, I'm shitty, you're never going to get better and you're never going to reach that level. But if you are really lit up by it and you can practice embodying the feeling of what it feels like to be good at it, sometimes I think that's enough of a crack in the glass, so to speak, to let inspiration start trickling, because we've all been in a spot where we're just overwhelmed. Too much going on, too many projects. The simplest things, like if one more some bill shows up or something breaks in my part, I'm going to lose it. You know, like I just can't handle one more thing. Nothing seems possible. But then when, you know, we do what I did, we go up to the roof, we get a breath, something changes, we go for a run, the energy shifts, everything feels just a little bit more possible. Yeah. So I think I agree with you. Hard work needs to be a part of it. But I think positive thinking can be almost, you know, for lack of a better term, the gateway drug into the hard work. Yeah. Because if you're starting to be positive now, you know what? You're going to seek out the people who are good at writing poetry. Yeah. You're going to show up at the poetry readings. You're going to watch the way that they speak. You're going to start browsing poetry websites because you love it and you will get better.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that. I think that's, it gets you through the hard part to allow you to then, like you said, do the hard work. As long as people know that as well, that it's not just a case of imagine. Oh, yay, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So you've mentioned NLP a couple times and Richard Bandler, who you've written books with. So many people listening don't even know what NLP stands for. Sure. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
So NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. So neuro refers to the brain or the mind. Linguistic is obviously language and communication, and programming is our ability to reprogram the way we think. So it looks at really two main areas. So one is how we think inside our head and how we create feelings, and the other is how we impact others through our communication. And so how we think, you know, we make images in our head. We talk to ourselves in certain ways and we build feelings from that. So if someone has a phobia, it's not the actual thing a lot of the times that scares them. It's their imagination of what that is. So if I'm working with someone, or when I worked with someone with a phobia, let's say they had a phobia of spiders, and they couldn't even deal with ants. What they would do is they would blow it up in their mind, make a big picture of that, and they would say to themselves, what if this? And they would see the ant and, you know, in a way that scared them or whatever. And they would the images inside their head were the part of the problem. So when you get them to be aware of how they're thinking and you get them to change the quality of those images, so maybe make the images smaller or move them further away or change the way in which they're thinking internally, it changes their internal response as well. So it changes the way they feel. And that's just a small example, but also if you want to be better at public speaking, and you want to be able to get to the point where you're able to stand in front of an audience and feel comfortable, there's simple techniques whereby you vividly imagine yourself succeeding, being happy, doing a great job, and then you find what we call an anchor. So it's a simple way of finding a trigger that you can use, that before you go to do that speech, you can use this trigger. Like it could be, you know, pressing together a finger and a thumb, or it could be standing into an imaginary square, or hearing a certain piece of music, whatever. You get that feeling and it re-triggers that feeling. So it's almost like we have these anchors, which can anchor us to new emotions. So it means you've got more control over your emotional state and you can feel how you want to when you need to. And then there's things about, you know, getting on better with others, creating rapport with other people, using language effectively, asking questions that help change their minds, using language in a way that's more persuasive. So all in all, NLP is a massive array of tools. It's not as well known as it possibly should be, because a lot of people use it and don't always give credit to it. But it's certainly a very powerful set of skills and a powerful attitude that's used a lot in coaching, a lot with therapists. It came from studying therapists. So it came from two researchers, Dr. Richard Bandler and John Grinder, back in the 1970s, when they would study the work of Virginia Satir, who's a family therapist, Fritz Perls, who was a Gestalt therapist, and Milton Erickson, who was a hypnotherapist. And they found, what were these therapists doing that were getting the results? And from therein, they developed a field from that. And then it's taken off, and it's been used by millions of people across the world. So it's a very powerful approach, NLP would be, and tends to get very, very cool results with people. That would be in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you. That's amazing. I've been really enjoying watching your Instagram stories lately.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, this is just something you just started doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had them on the what do you call it? Shout out for my Instagram, by the way, Owen F23. If you can follow, I'd really appreciate it. So yeah, I do, like, I used to have them in the feed, like in the normal. But I'm just experimenting and putting in the stories. And it's just like coming up with a different tip of the day. And I keep pushing away at it because you never know. And sometimes people respond. But, what happens is you do it and then there's like fucking crickets. And then someone will come up to you going, I love those stories and stuff. And you're like going, well, you could have fucking told me then. Like, because it's like crickets on it. You don't know what's working and what's not, But it's just different ideas, different thoughts when I'm out for a run, just to put it across. And I try to be a bit inventive with it and have fun with it. So I just think it's so hard to say something meaningful in a short space of time, especially on a constant, consistent basis. And so I'm just trying to, and some of them are better than others, and some of them are more useful than others. But, sometimes people like ask me questions going, I wonder, could you address this? And it's like this gigantic question about, the meaning of life. And yeah, I got 15 seconds to answer that question, and you're like, oh, here, this is going to be fun. So, yeah, thanks. What do you think? Are they all right?
You had one the other day that was on dopamine.
Oh, yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit? That was so fascinating to me. Yes.
So basically, I'm trying to remember which one it was. Dopamine.
Yeah. What was that called?
I think
Dopamine Balance.
Oh, Dopamine Balance. Right. So basically, yes. So there's a chemical in our brain called dopamine, and dopamine is related to motivation. So oftentimes people talk about it being happiness, but it's not really happiness. It's just whenever we experience something new, or whenever we're driven to do something, whenever you desire something, it's dopamine. So you see something you want and you feel a massive amount of dopamine. And what happens is that you're driven towards it. But all addiction, it's very basics, has dopamine as an inherent essential part of that. So in order to get addicted to something, regardless of whether it's fucking Instagram or it's crack, either way, it's the same mechanism. Dopamine is massively, in different levels, obviously, depending on what the addiction is, but it's massive, a release of dopamine through our system. Now, we always have dopamine in our system, that's moving around. We have much higher levels whenever we want something. And so with the dopamine balance, the idea very simply is that it's important for you to get to the point where you're creating dopamine of the things that you need to be motivated to do. So dopamine to exercise, dopamine to go to bed early, dopamine to eat healthy, dopamine to get the work done you need to do. But it's also important that you don't go too far. So you become one of these people that's a slave to it. So if you don't exercise, your whole fucking day is ruined. Or if you don't eat healthy, you're going to hate yourself and self-hatred. You have to get to the point where you balance it out. So that, number one, you're choosing the kinds of things to be, in inverted commas, addicted to. And you're not like too addicted to them. It's not like, you can't do without them. And when you have that sort of balance, it's a really healthy way. Because these people are saying, when people say, don't get attached to anything, fine. But then you're kind of getting attached to the idea of detachment. That's the little thing I always saw with that, the problem with that. And so the way it is that we do want to move forward. It's not just about the now. It's about building the future. So we do need that drive. And so if you can get to the point where you're imagining how great it will be and you're motivating yourself, you'll boost your dopamine levels. But you don't want to ever get to the point that if you don't do it, it's like the end of the world. And that's what it feels like when you're really addicted. You just feel, I have to do this. I have to, inject this heroin. I have to, put on this bed. I have to sleep with this person. I have to. That's when it's unhealthy, because that means you're out of control. When it's healthy is, I really want to, but if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. And that's kind of the balance, if that makes sense. And I kind of like I like seeing as much as possible from the whole neurochemistry point of view, because it feels to me real. It's obviously they're kind of simplistic explanations of a much more complex mechanism, but at the same time, for me at least, it makes everything feel more real. Whenever I have an idea and there's like something going on neurochemically, I'm like going, okay, I understand what's going on, And similar when we were talking about depression, when you know what's happening, when you know your serotonin levels are all fucked up, or, whatever, okay, so what I need to do is I need to get them back. And, I think that's in a nutshell, the dopamine balance. Because I come up with the names on the spot. That's why I didn't remember that. It's not like,
so you made it up.
I made up the word. The actual thing is totally legit. Cross my heart, hope to die. Not hope to die too much, but but the names I make up, because I try to come up with fancy names just so people go instead of going.
Can you do that again?
That's called the technique. So I use that sometimes to confuse people. Keep them off their
working.
Game. Well, I don't like to boast, but I'm a natural.
I love this idea though of, you said, kind of like wiring ourselves to have dopamine responses to the things we want ourselves to do, like the positive habits. That's amazing. And we were talking about the war of art again, and this idea of resistance. And I've been encountering that myself. I mean, it's something that I'm watching because, for example, even this podcast, I love doing it. But some days I get really bogged down with, okay, the website and the newsletter, and I got to do the Instagram, and I'll wake up actually thinking about, oh my gosh, I have all these things to do, and this is this, instead of today I get to get up and create this really cool thing. Yeah. And there's the dopamine, right? Like that kind of linking in with that sense of freedom and this beautiful thing that I'm creating. It's amazing how just flipping the breaker on the mind creates a completely different experience of that same thing.
Oh, 100%. And I think though that the issue with overwhelm and stuff is that we get into the point where we have to do something, and when we have to do it, instead of it being I have to, as in I'm really fucking driven towards doing it, it's like we give ourselves a bunch of shoulds. So we create these rules where we have to do it, and then that reflects us back to when we're in school and when we're like, told what we have to do, and we're naturally, most people are naturally rebellious creatures. We don't like to do what we're told to do. So if you force a person to do, there's a lot of fascinating experiments where they force people to, like, you have to eat chocolate at this certain time, and initially people are like, great, but then it's like, oh no, I don't want to. It's we react negatively to the things we're supposed to do. And so the real trick to it is organizing your workload in that way. There's a thing called habit stacking, whereby you take some habit that you have already. So it could be brushing your teeth. And let's say you want to practice mantras, right? Let's just say you want to do that, and you're like looking in the mirror going, God, Owen, you're beautiful. God, you're so handsome. God, you're so clever. God, you definitely look young. You're definitely not middle-aged like some mean people might say. Like, let's say you just repeat, hypothetically, you're repeating those kind of mantras to yourself. Then you make it so you link it with the brushing your teeth. Now it's kind of hard because it's very hard to understand what the mantras are if you're like brushing your teeth while you're so you're beautiful. So it could be right after it, but you link it to something you already do, which makes it easier for you to do it. The other thing though is what I've done, and I've done this intuitively since I was a kid, is I always find the shit that I love to do, and I do it after the stuff that I don't like to do. So let's say I got to do accounts or financial stuff, which makes me want to bang my head mercilessly against the wall until I die. That's something I hate, right? And On the other hand, I love creative stuff. So if I get to write my screenplays, or I get to work on my TV episode, or I get to work on my play, for me, I reward myself with, this is sounding like completely nerdy, but I'm actually really, I just want everyone to know I'm actually very cool, despite what this sounds like. But I give myself that reward of the, I get to write and create. I can't wait to get lost in these characters if I get my finance and stuff done, do you know? And I do the same thing with running. I don't enjoy running. I have friends of mine that love it. I don't. I think it's a pain in the arse to have to run. I hate it. Well, I don't hate it. Sometimes it's okay. But I don't enjoy it. But I do it regularly because after it, I have this ritual that I give myself where I get my smoothie, which is like, it's protein and blah, blah, but it tastes gorgeous. And I give myself that as a reward. And so when I'm on the run, I'm like, I'm seeing that, I'm seeing the smoothie, I'm seeing the place. And that's what works for me. I'm not saying it works for everyone, but it allows me to connect. Like, let's say, for example, I decide, fuck this, I'm not going for a run. No smoothie. What? But Owen, I want. No, I don't care. You want it? You have to do this, then you do that. So now I've learned to associate that. So now I'm excited. I'm looking forward to going to the run because of what comes after it. And again, I'm not saying that's right for everyone, but I am saying that's an example of creating that dopamine effect. My dopamine drives me towards going on the run because also you feel great after it, but it's mainly because of where it leads to at the end. Because sometimes we go, I'm going to go for a run because I want to be real fit. But sometimes those images of us in the future is too far away and doesn't create the same kind of feeling. You look at the cupcake in the present or the vanilla ice cream in the present, and then you look at the body in the future, and you go 6-pack in the future. You got to be realistic as well. The 6-pack doesn't look as good as the ice cream does for a lot of people. And so if it doesn't, then you got to give yourself rewards in the present. And they should be conducive towards you getting the results. So that's an example of the dopamine effect.
Yeah, this is conditioning. Like, I don't know, is it operant or classical?
This would be more operant than classical, because with classical, it's two things happen at the same time. So Pavlov's dog and stuff. Right. Does the name Pavlov ring a bell?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, that was an all joke.
With the
you got it. Da-ding. But the other,
that was terrible.
Yeah, I know. The other one, operant conditioning from B.F. Skinner. Basically, that's the reward and the positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement.
Exactly.
And so a lot of literature just shows you, the importance of that. The interesting thing about the reward is that you need to make sure that the reward is regularly and consistently applied in that way. Now, after a while, you want to also jazz it up a bit because intermittent fasting, exactly, intermittent rewards schedule so that it's not every single time. Now,
because they lose their efficacy.
That's it, exactly it. So you have to play around with that. Now, I don't do that for the smoothies. I make sure every time I go for the smoothies, it's fine. But like, I'll give myself extra things and, change things around a bit besides that.
This is interesting. This is reminding me of, so after my psychology degree, I did an education degree, and we studied rewards a lot.
Oh, wow.
Because as a tool to use or not to use in the classroom. And the work of Alfie Kohn is really, really fascinating. But honestly, the view in the teaching community is that these kind of external rewards like stickers and things like that, they're just not that effective. They're just not that effective because, like what you said, they lose their luster over time. And so I don't know. I don't know if I have a point to this, but it's like, is it possible to intrinsically motivate all this, or no? There has to be some sort of.
Well, I think there's two questions. So I think one question is the question you just asked, but the other thing to remind people of, I suppose, as well, is look at our phones. Our phones, the games have mastered this. So the creator of games have millions of pieces of data.
You're talking about like Candy Crush?
I'm talking about Candy Crush. Okay. I'm talking about Angry Birds. I'm talking about all that stuff. They have millions of, and I'm talking about like proper, like, computer games as well, PC games or whatever. They have millions of pieces of data that they've collected from players online, which allows them to know what works. So, for example, one of the things, I'm trying to remember if I get the exact statistics right, but it's close to this. They figured out that let's say you play a game where you get rewarded for whenever you collect a certain thing, you get rewarded. You don't get rewarded every time you collect it, but they've found the sweet spot is 1 of every 4. And so if you get a reward 1 out of every 4, that keeps you playing, and that's more likely. So all of this information, this big data that they've collected from all of these computer games has explained exactly how people are motivated, because they can keep people playing these games for hours and hours and hours. Now, who are the main people who play games? I know there's a lot of adults that do it, but a large proportion is children. And so when we turn around and we go, well, the problem is we just don't know how to motivate children. It's impossible to motivate children in this day and age. No, it's not. The games people are doing. And you might go, yeah, well, that's the game stuff. I mean, that's fun stuff. But, some of those games are so complicated to fucking learn. And kids are able to lap it up because, again, there's a reward at the end of it. And they know how to be able to do this. Now, if we come back to the question, and we're talking about, well, what about how does motivating kids work then in that world? One of the biggest problems is culturally today, and it came from a good place, this idea that says, let's reward kids for everything, right? You're participated. Everyone gets a medal. It's fundamentally a terrible idea. And the reason I say that is because, and I understand why it came about, and I think that I understand the positive intention is we don't want certain people to feel not good enough, and we don't want certain children to feel sad. I understand that, but there's other ways to do that. I think if the world is competitive. When kids leave school, one thing they learn is, number 1, life is not fair. Number 2, only the strong survive. I mean, that's just in the nature of business. It's a nature in those ways. And I don't mean physically. But the reality is that if you're rewarding kids all the time for everything, then the rewards lose. It's like saying I love you. If you say I love you all the time, then it ceases to have meaning. When you don't say it that often, but you say it, it's so much more powerful. And so, I have a friend of mine, for example, and she's like, she will go, oh my God, Owen, I love you so much. You're like the greatest person in the world. And I feel great for the next few minutes. And then we're walking past and she sees a fucking cake in the window, and she goes, oh my God, I love that cake so much. It's like the greatest cake I've ever seen. And I'm like going, so pretty much, oh my God, this microphone. I love this microphone so much. This is like the greatest microphone. I love the lamp. Oh my God. It's just, it gets to that point where it means less. So then getting back to the question then, which is, how do we make things intrinsically rewarded? Well, intrinsic motivation by its very nature is down to you doing it because of how it makes you feel, as opposed to some external reward. And if you think about it, it's the meaning of the reward that matters. So it's the meaning of the particular event. And so what we need to do is we need to create adequate meanings, right?
Yes.
So for example, years ago, I was working with a kid who was going to school, and he was being forced by his parents to go to school. He didn't want to, and he was fighting back. And he turns to me, and we're talking about different languages. And he goes to me, well, what do I need to learn Spanish for? I don't need to learn Spanish. I'm in fucking Ireland. Like, why do I need to learn Spanish? And I said, let me ask you a question. I said, have you heard of Shakira? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, do you like her? And he goes, yeah, she's hot. Like, I said, all right, let me ask you this. You know where Shakira's from? He goes, South America or something, is it? I said, yeah, Colombia. And he goes, right. I go, do you know in Colombia, there's a lot of girls that look very like Shakira? Because I've been there. I go there regularly. Really? I go, yeah. That's just one country in South America. They speak Spanish there. They're like, all right. I'm like, many other countries there are in South America. And I'm bringing him through it all. And by the end of it, he's like going, all right. So he's motivated now. And this is, although it starts external, it's now for him, Spanish means something different to him. He's a reason inherently connected to what he wants, what's of interest to him. So then he turns to me and he goes, well, that's fair enough about Spanish, but tell me about Irish. Why do I have to learn the Irish language? right? And so what most people would do in that context is most people will go, well, it's part of our heritage, but I knew that none of those things were here's hot buttons. So I said, let me ask you this question. You ever on a bus in Dublin and you see two Spanish students on the bus and you hear them over talking to each other about you, and you know it's about you, but you don't know what they're saying? And he goes, yeah. I said, that's frustrating, isn't it? He goes, yeah. But I said, now imagine this. Imagine you're in New York. Do you think you'll ever go to the States? He goes, yeah. I said, imagine you're over in New York with your mate and the two of you are there and you want to talk about this girl, but you can't talk English because you know she things, but you want to say something. Imagine you had this secret code language that you could talk to each other a bit and she has no clue what you're talking about. How cool would that be? And his eyes lit up and he's going, oh man, that'd be deadly. Deadly is a positive word. We use deadly as a positive word. He goes, that'd be deadly. That'd be great. Yeah. So now he's gotten reasons that are connected to his intrinsic needs, what he wants, as opposed to me going, you should do this because of this, this, this. And to me, that's one of the missing pieces, not just for kids, but in general, is that we always try to influence people the wrong way. That's my main, the stuff that I do as I go into organizations, I help them with influence and storytelling and stuff. The biggest mistake we make is we go and we give them all the reasons why they should do something. We give them the logical reasons. But what we need to do is figure out intrinsically, what do they want? That's the first question. Not what do I want you to know, but what do you want? Then what do I want? Then how do we connect the dots? And so if you can think about it from that point of view, you're way more likely to get the results. And I believe that the same applies to kids as well. But what I've seen, I think they're getting better at it. I think the educational system's getting better in a lot of ways, not in others, but I know that so many of my friends have kids and I fucking enjoy going to school.
Right.
I hated going to school, hated every second of it, or the majority of it. And I don't think I was alone. Even the dentists are apparently getting better. You know, my friend, his kids look forward to going to the dentist. I don't know how anybody could. No disrespect to dentists, because I think dentists do an incredible job, but Jesus, how do people look forward to that? But it's because they've created an amazing experience based upon what the kids want or what people want. Sorry, that was a long rant, but you know.
No, this is great. I mean, obviously when I first started my company, Lunar Wild, I read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is obviously a classic. And what you just said really reminded me of just writing emails. And that book blew my mind.
Yeah.
And I kind of was going back through my old emails going, this is totally the way I used to write emails. Yeah. I used to state what I wanted, but I was articulate and I wrote well, but I would read it back and go, I, this is how many times I said what I want in this email instead of offering something or asking what the other person needed or showing them how they needed me to do X, Y, Z. And showing my value and how I could, basically lift something off of their plate because that's what we want. And I was watching something the other day. I think it was a little Instagram clip from Mickey Agrawal talking about, don't ask people, can I pick your brain or can I take you out for a coffee? I mean, honestly, that just seems like for busy people, more work. You have to start by saying, what can I do for you?
Yeah. And I mean, even Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this as well. Gary V, he emphasizes give value, and then maybe ask. But it's give first. And I think that's imperative, and it's so much more important now than ever before, because nowadays time is, of the essence, as they say. It feels like time is scarce and it feels like every moment's more valuable. So in order for you to earn people's time, you have to be prepared to figure out, well, what can I give them for that? And how can we make this something that benefits them? How can, like you said, you can take something off their plate or help them in some way. So yeah, I think that was true in Dale Carnegie's time, in terms of how to win friends, and also true today as well, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. You had this phrase that I absolutely loved. I think it was on your TED Talk, but you said genocide of the mind.
Oh, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most poetic things I've ever heard.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's about the only poetic thing in the poem. But yeah, genocide of the mind was like when I got into propaganda, because I've been studying propaganda, like proper propaganda, for years. It's fascinates me. So I studied cults. I studied deprogramming in cults. I went to North Korea. I went to Afghanistan. I went to Rwanda, all looking at how propaganda works, because we're all victims of it. But it's just in those places, it's more obvious. At least it was very obvious in North Korea. But when I went to Rwanda, and I went to there was a museum there that I went to after, because I'd obviously I'd done a lot of reading on the genocide that happened. And when I went into the thing, it was not just about Rwanda, but it was mainly about Rwanda, and then it was about all the other atrocities. And I mean, I've been to Auschwitz, I've been to, some horrific sites over the world. But more than anything, that fucked me up. Like I left, I was in bits. I couldn't fucking think straight. I left that after about 2-3 hours. I went through the whole thing, but I was broken because there's pictures of kids, there's stories, and I was just, it was horrible. And so when I was doing that, I wanted to reference that. I wanted to draw attention to that. So I have a little piece in there where I go, I talk about the propaganda, when I went to Rwanda, the stories that there, and I talk about this and that and the other, and how horrible it was, and the Hutus and the Tutsis and all that. But then I connect it to the talk. So the whole talk is trying to connect the external propaganda to the internal propaganda. And so I connected then to it, and I talk about, just like there's the genocide in reality, we also have the genocide of the mind, because ultimately speaking, a person commits suicide. I think it's 12 people kill themselves. I think it's I don't remember. 27 is the number of people worldwide that by the end of the speech have already died. So every 10 minutes, 27 people die of suicide across the world. 27 within every 10 minutes. And so when you look at that, my own brush with, I almost killed myself when I was a teenager, and I worked with so many suicidal people. I had like conversations on the phone where someone was about to do it, and I've a lot of personal experience. So I'm very close to suicide, and it's been something that's been a big deal to me for a long, long time. And so that terminology, I don't know if other people have used it before, and it somehow subconsciously made it in, but it was the best description of what suicide is. It's genocide of the mind, because it finds ways to kill us mentally. So that leads us to kill ourselves physically. And so the key to winning this war is by going on the attack. And then it's choosing to reject the thoughts and all the stuff we talked about earlier. It's taking up arms and not allowing ourselves to be victims and winning this war. And that's, again, connecting it into the war. And that's what I was trying to go with that, was the fact that, we talk about these tragedies, which are horrific. 1 million people murdered by machete. I mean, it's just, but we often just, see suicide in a different zone. And we need to stop doing that. We need to see it, that this is what's happening. There's bomb attacks that are going on inside our mind, mental bombs. There's mental gunfire where we're shooting ourselves down every single time. We need to start describing it like this, because if we don't, we just go, oh, negative thoughts. It seems innocuous. It seems like, innocent. We need to start recognizing that there's a lot of bad shit that's happening inside our head. And only when you recognize that, you can do something about it. And that's what, what we try to do, what the work that I've been doing, with the books that I write, with everything to the fucking Instagram stories, is all trying to help people both communicate better and influence and impact other people, but also change their own mind. My own podcast, Changing Minds with Owen Fitzpatrick. Subscribe. Sorry for the plug, but that's, again, one of the things that driving that, like here on this podcast, about your thoughts and about exploring it and getting to know your thoughts and disassociating yourself from your thoughts. And it's so powerful. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it. And to me, inner peace comes from that. It comes from a combination of obviously meditating and wonderful things like that, but also sometimes we need to grab ourselves by the scruff of the neck and say, not today, because what got me through my tough time wasn't learning a skill or learning this. It was the metaphor that I used for it. And it was, the fact that I saw it as it was like a boxing fight for me. That's what saved me. So again, I'm sure I'm not alone, and that's probably the shortest explanation I can give as to why that term came, genocide of the mind.
Think about it. It's almost like being in a codependent or like a bad relationship. It's like we almost become addicted to the way that we talk to ourselves too. And I've thought this before. I've been like, I would never tolerate a friend or a lover who spoke to me this way. Mm-hmm. And the more you become aware of it, at first it's a little alarming. Mm-hmm. Before you start becoming aware of your thoughts, and for me, this was pre-meditation, I was just asleep on some track. I couldn't even tell you what I was thinking, but I know my life wasn't that great. And then when I started to become aware of it, now, for example, I'll walk into the bathroom in the morning and I'll look at myself in the mirror. And if I maybe got off on the wrong side of the bed, it's like, oh God, you look tired. Or like, you got a pimple, a big old pimple on your face. And I'm like, stop that.
Yeah.
No, I was like, nice try, Hallie.
Yeah.
You almost got me there. You look fucking great. You look great. You're killing it. And I just, in that moment, if I can catch it in that moment, choosing a different thought right then. But this getting out of the bed thing, I know this is an issue for a lot of people. I've had this conversation over and over and over again, and I'm curious to get your opinion. So that moment you wake up, your eyes open, maybe you're having a weird dream.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm tired. Or like, I do not want to do this laundry list of things that I have to do today. Like, what's the move right there in that moment?
I think there's a few choices, right? So I don't think there's like one remedy for everyone. I can say what I do, but I can also say what other people like. So one thing that other people like, which works, is the Mel Robbins stuff. So there's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And I kind of like it. It's very simple, but it's literally like no hesitation, no bullshit. It's just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, straight out of bed. And that's how you get yourself to do that. So that's one option. Another option is to ask yourself a different question. So always start off with asking yourself a certain question, whatever that might be, as how can I make this fun? What is the most important thing I need to do today? What's the most fun thing I have to look forward to today? Whatever question immediately gets you into that. Another choice is to prime yourself. So you put on some music that revs you up, your favorite piece of music, you go blah, 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 and you dance around the apartment and you do whatever it is that gives you, pleasure or bliss. That's another choice. My approach is probably not, I wouldn't recommend my approach to most people, but it works for me. And literally, like if I wake up and open my eyes and my brain goes, oh God, it's tired, I just respond to going, suck it up, shut the fuck up, get out of bed, just get on with it. But I don't give a shit what you want. Shut the fuck up. It's not about you. I have to do shit, so shut up. And that's the way I do it. Now, I don't recommend that for everybody, but I'm sure there's people like
that's
me.
Irish style.
That's it. It's like no bullshit. It's like, what are you complaining about? I've like friends of mine that talk like that to me anyway. So, but it's just not taking any shit from yourself. So, I mean, it's kind of a lighter version of, let's say, David Goggins, who's a legend. Mm-hmm. And so David Goggins is like fucking hardcore
running on
that.
Broken legs.
Yeah. He's a fucking lunatic, a legend though. I love him.
Yeah.
But and his book Can't Hurt Me is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like an extreme version of that. I'm not like nearly that extreme. I'm like, all right, we'll take it easy now, bro. You want to get yourself an ice cream? It's fine.
I got a blister. I'm not running today.
Yeah. Oh, good. Oh, it's okay.
Can I still have the smoothie?
Yeah.
I'm middle-aged. Give me a smoothie.
There you go. Thank you. Yeah. I better get back to the moisturizer. Hallie will be slagging me off again. So that's how I like to do it. But there's a bundle of choices that you have at your disposal. I just think that what we need to do is we like. I like being sarcastic with myself in terms of talk back, because I know that for some people what works is, and then I'm not talking just when you get out of bed in the morning. I'm talking about general thinking. For what works for some people when they think negatively is to just think positively. For some people, mantras work. For some people, all different things. What I like to do is I like to be sarcastic with myself or exaggerate it. So if I go, oh God, this won't work out. And I go, of course it won't work out because you're a loser, because everything you ever do is shit, because you're a piece of shit, Owen, is that right? And I exaggerate my own internal dialogue to the point that I go, okay, I get the point. Mm-hmm. Do you know?
It's theatrical at that point.
Exactly. And that's, to me, that works really well because I kind of like it. Because I always like to get myself laughing. That's my go-to. What saves me all the time is my laughter, and thank God I find myself funny, because I spend a lot of time on my own. And I was thinking about it today. You spend all the time on your own. You've got to enjoy your own company, and so I do. And part of the reason I do is because I make myself laugh. And I've been in situations with people that don't like my sense of humor because they got no taste, but I do. So therefore, I'm at least happy with me. So at least one of us is enjoying. At least one of us is enjoying hanging out with me. But that's the point. It's like you have to do what works for you. And for some people, that's meditation. And it's like, okay, fucking the alarm's gone off. Now I need to meditate for the next fucking 20 minutes. I need to separate myself. And then I need to do my cryogenic thing. And then I need to fucking have a cold shower. And then I need to stretch. And I need to do this. And if that's what makes you feel good, if that's what gets you through, wonderful. But it's not for everyone. For some people, it's like, some people I know there's like stay away from your phone is a good piece of advice. But for some people, they have a certain place that they go, a certain funny video that they watch, and that, makes them happy. So you got to know yourself, and you got to figure out what brings you to the state you need to be in order to get you to be able to do the things you want to do. You get me?
Yeah. It's almost like distracting yourself out of a negative mindset in some way, like finding a tool that works for you and moving that, if you want to call it energy or whatever you want to call it, but you can't stay there or you're going to perpetuate,
exactly.
I think, more of that downward spiral.
100%. I think that the mistake people make is Tim Ferriss is fantastic, but Tim will, like, let's say, talk about the rituals in the morning. And that's great. And you will learn from what mentors and for what legends do in the morning. And there is some stuff and you can try it. And I definitely recommend you learn from an experiment. But don't assume just because Elon Musk does A, B, and C in the morning, that if you do A, B, and C in the morning, you're going to like start inventing fucking, electric cars. You have to figure out what works for you. And that means experimenting and noticing on your mood what has happened as a result of that. Mm-hmm. And once you experiment enough, you find what works. Is like eating. You eat different things and you go, shit, when I have 6 cups of coffee after 9 p.m., I never sleep. So I wonder what I need to do. Well, maybe I need to change that. And so there's certain things we learn from the world, from what other people do, from what science tells us. And then we have to try it ourselves, because not everything works the same way for everyone. Mm-hmm. And once you know that, then you can figure out what works best for you.
You're making me think about times at which I was really low, like at the bottom of the rung. And I'm sure you've had those times too, where those annoying people that love you come into your life and they try and tell you everything's great. Like, here's all the things you have to be grateful for. And it's just like, you can't, they're saying words, but it's almost like they just don't stick. It's just, you're too lubricated and it's sliding right off of you. Yeah. And for me, that's getting to the point of hopelessness, and hopelessness is scarier than just depression. I mean, that's the point before suicide, where you can't even dig yourself. You don't even see the point, and you're too tired. Yeah. So people come in making it seem all simple, like you just gotta, just gotta be positive. And that makes it worse. That really exacerbates the problem, and you feel like no one's listening to you. So my question is, when we get into those super low states, maybe there's someone listening to this right now that's like, I'm at the end. I don't even know what to do. I've tried everything. I've tried having good habits. I've tried setting my alarm to get up. I've tried changing my diet, and I still feel like shit. And I look at happy people and it feels so far away. I feel I feel detached from humanity. In fact, I don't even feel connected to anyone. I have no empathy, nothing. You've probably been there. Yeah. How does someone take the first baby step? Because happy's too far away. Happy's not even accessible. What do we do when we get that low?
So the first step would be, don't expect that you're just going to be I don't feel like you just have to make one switch and you can be happy. Just see it as a continuum, that you have to feel a little less shit than you do. And so your goal should be, I want to feel a little less shit than I'm doing at the moment. So that's one thing. Second thing is you need to reach out and you need to tell somebody, and you need to talk to someone, whether that's a counselor, whether it's a fucking, hotline for suicide. We have the Samaritans in Ireland who do a great job, but you have many suicide numbers here. Talk to someone, get it out, talk, express, get help, let people know. For me, with regards to close ones, I just say I'm physically sick. I say, I have bad stomach. Because then they shut the fuck up, because nobody... Whenever you're depressed, people try to cheer you up because they care, because they love you. So they're coming from the right place. But if you're sick, there's not much they do. They go, oh, if let's say, for example, you call me and you go, yeah, Owen, I've fucking terrible flu. After me saying, well, make sure you get sleep and drink vitamin C, I ain't going to give a big, long talk to you, There's no pressure for you to just go, oh, okay. Whereas with depression, it's almost like you have to immediately react and be happy in order not to negate what they've just said to you. So to me, I just fake it. I just go, no, I tell somebody, but I don't necessarily, unless they understand, unless they've gotten to the point they're more enlightened about depression and what it's about. If they are, then I'll express to them. I say, look, I'm going through a tough time now. I just need my space or whatever. Or if they're the kind of people that can listen, great. But for me, if they aren't at that level, and if it's too hard to get them to that level, I just be like, well, physically I don't feel great, because then they kind of, they're more accepting of that, and that's kind of it's a short-term fix. So the most important thing is you have to tell people, you set yourself the standards of, I want to feel a little less shit, and then you have to start building yourself goals. And so remember, depression's a liar, so everything you say, it's gonna argue against. And so even something like this, I don't think I'll be able to do this, but maybe it might be possible for me to do this. Probably not, but maybe. But when you stick it like that around, it changes the dynamics of it, because it's your depressed voice is way less likely to challenge that. If you said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to write a book, your depressed voice is going, fuck you, you talentless bastard. You don't know what you're talking about. You and you're writing a book. Everything you've ever written has been shit. Go on, try to write there. Go on, you can't. You see? You know why? Because you're fucking useless. You're a piece of blah, blah, blah. Whereas if you turn around going, you know what? I'm never going to be able to write a book. It's not possible for me. But maybe I might be able to do something at least. So I'm just going to give it a shot, but it's not going to work. But I'll give it a shot. Now all of a sudden you're writing it, but your inner voice is shutting the fuck up. Why is your inner voice shutting up? Because you've agreed with it beforehand. You've taken its energy away. It's the end of the Eminem, 8 Mile. It's like, I am white trash. I am this. I do live in a trailer with my mom, but I'm still screaming fuck the world or whatever he said. I don't know if I remember,
Yeah.
But it was a great movie. And that part was him taking the ammunition away. So those are the things. You need to reach out, and you have to look after your body. You have to, it's so important to be looking after your physical health and looking after your emotional health. And learning a new skill is another thing that really helps. Again, don't set the bar, I have to be happy. Just set the bar, I got to learn a new skill. For me, MMA and stuff like that, and boxing and kickboxing, that helps. And not even fighting other people, but even fighting the poor bag that can't punch back. It's my favorite type of opponent for that reason. But it's it's an energy that you get to release it. There's a beauty to that kind of exercise, I think, from an emotional point of view. And so it's whatever works for you, but you have to acknowledge what's going on and don't set yourself up for failure, because then it's just more evidence. Because your part of your brain's clever. It's waiting for you to make a mistake. So just let it win. accept it, but keep moving forward. Keep doing shit. And the worst thing you can possibly do is move your feet. Get the fuck out of your room. Don't stay inside. I don't give a shit if you work for yourself. Go to a coffee shop. You have to get out. You have to get out of bed. You have to get out. And even if you feel like shit and you look like shit, so what? You have to get out there and you've got to sit in. I mean, how can things get worse? Do you know what I mean? So you got to get out there and you got to sit in. And there's a certain, freedom that comes with being that low, because, sometimes you can get to a place where you're like, nothing fucking matters. And if nothing matters, then there's no reason to get pissed off about stuff, So I think I think those are the kinds of things, but like reach out, get help, maybe sometimes like people argue against it. Sometimes medication will help, talk to your doctor. I wouldn't be jumping on it straight away, but sometimes that's what's necessary. You got to figure out what works for you. But the most important thing I'll say is you're not alone. If you're out there and you're in pain and you want to end your life, or you're struggling or depressed, you're not alone. No matter how tough it feels, how bad it feels, I promise you, there's other people that feel that way, and therefore, knowing that should let you know that if there's other people like you that are battling that are feeling that way, you can win too, and you can battle it too, and you need to reach out, because you've no idea that other people are fighting battles as well, and we never let people know that. Rarely do we. We always hide it and pretend and everything's fucking wonderful, but it's not. And hopefully that makes you feel less likely that you're disconnected, that you don't belong in this world, because I think a lot of us feel that, I feel quite a lot that I don't belong, in this world. I feel like detached in that way. And that's a normal enough feeling, for people if they're thinking very deeply. But just because you think deeply doesn't mean you think smart. And we need to just be aware of that and give ourselves a break. And again, remembering all the stuff that we were talking about earlier in terms of looking after your physical body and that kind of thing. So I don't know if that's helpful or useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Owen, this has been absolutely incredible.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Do you want to tell people a little bit about where they can find you and maybe what your upcoming projects are that you've got going on?
Sure. So the most important things I'd say is, I suppose, I have my own podcast, Changing Minds podcast. So please give a listen to that. I have loads of different types of episodes on that. I have interviews, and I've also the work of, which is Dale Carnegie or Brené Brown or whatever. I do episodes on them. And then I also have, so that's that. Then I also have my Instagram, which I regularly update with videos and quotes and stuff like that. And then I have my YouTube channel, which is loads of videos on that. There's, I think, a couple of hundred videos on that. Again, some funny, weird ones, and then some more, direct ones and stuff like that, but a combination. And then there's the Tedx Talk, Mind Control. And then the last thing I'd say is I've got my website, which you can sign up for my newsletter, and it's called The Legendary List for Brilliant People. And the name of the newsletter is Legendary Tips for Brilliant People. So you can only qualify for this if you're a brilliant person. So,
but you made it.
Which I made it, yeah. Yeah, well, I didn't. Technically, I didn't, because it's for brilliant people. I'm the one who writes the newsletter.
Oh, right.
But it's a few tips, 5 tips that I give, or, from different things that I've learned. Not 5, a few tips of different things that I recommend and whatever. And I send it every second Tuesday. And
they can sign up at your website,
which is owenfitzpatrick.com.
Awesome.
So they're all the way. So thanks very much, Hallie. I've loved talking to you. I really enjoyed this episode, and I hope that everyone out there has gotten something useful from it and hasn't been like bored out of their tree.
Thank you so much for stopping by.
You're very welcome. Thank you.